Welcome everyone to our channel The Planner's Way. Myself Rohit. In this video I'm going to cover a couple of scenario based questions regarding the constraints. Let's begin the video. Starting with what's the constraint are or what are the project constraint. The constraints are the limiting factors that defines the boundaries within which a project must be delivered. Either the boundary might be that of scope or that of time or the cost or sometimes the risk. The major impact of the constraint is the influence and the decision making. Regarding the different types of constraints, the famous is the classic triple constraint, which we call the iron triangle as well. If you The classic triple constraints, they are the scope, time and cost. Scope Regarding the scope means it defines the boundary what need to be delivered, and regarding the time it defines when it must be delivered, and regarding the cost what budget is required to deliver it. So these three defines the boundary of the project, what scope need to be done, at what time need to be done, and what will be the overall cost on which the project need to be done. In modern days, we have introduced three more constraints which impact a project, which are quality, risk, and the resources. Quality means the standard at which the project needs to be delivered. Resources deals with the availability of the resources and the boundary of the resources or the number of resources we have on which the project need to be done. And the risk means the uncertainties that are linked with the project, which also hinder or affect the overall project completion or that of the execution phase, or this uncertainty impact the project outcomes. So these three are introduced as the modern day constraints. Okay, further understanding why constraint matters. For this, understanding constraint matter because they directly influence the activity dates float that of the critical path, which replicate the mirror image of the project at what time the project will complete. So as the constraint have the direct impact on the critical path, we need to analyze and we need to understand the constraint in a better way. So any misused constraint can create the artificial deadline or distort the true logic or the true picture of the schedule that it is going to reflect. So we need to understand properly whether the constraint is replicating something with the real world scenario or not. In a project, we need to deliver something on the end of the month, or there are contractual obligations, or there are end date. If we want to replicate those dates, we need to put the constraints on the schedule. As long as they replicate the real world situation or the real world scenario, we need to introduce the constraint. That's fine. But the constraint need to be put across with proper review with the subject matter expert whether they are appropriate there or not, or else we leave the program to flow as per the logic. That's why we need to understand the constraint better to replicate the real world scenario on our schedule. How to manage the constraint effectively? For that, most of the planner what they do is wherever they have put the constraint in the schedule, they will note it down or document it properly. Secondly, we can regularly review and remove the unnecessary constraint in any schedule, which can be done by thorough understanding of the program, going through each of the logics and the schedule, whether if the logic is properly replicating the things, and if the unnecessary constraints are placed in between, we can just take them out. And the third approach is validating this constraint with the realistic field data, whether they are replicating the field or the contractual obligation dates or not. If those constraints are not something replicating the field data or the practical scenario, they have potential to distort the critical path, so we can take them out. And this way we can manage the constraint in any program. In any program, there are two type of constraint. One is the hard constraint and second one is the soft constraint. The hard constraint is something which have potential to amend the logic flow, or if the program needs to be completed or started by, or any particular activity need to be start on that particular date, which is the must start on or the must finish on, which we can't go beyond that. On that case, we have to introduce these constraint. As they have capacity to override the logic, we need to avoid them as much as possible. But if needed, they should be. If needed, we have to keep them across and properly document and manage them. They are used only when a date is non-negotiable, such as contract milestone, or the regulatory dates, or any obligatory dates, or the project completion date. Sub-constraints are something that we have placed across in the schedule to replicate real field data. We avoid the constraint in a program, but as far as we have to place it, or we afford the soft constraint on the program rather than a hard constraint, because it will not distort the logic. It will replicate the real world scenario, keeping the logic intact on place. Used where there is a flexibility but some time limit or the condition that need to be replicated. Sometimes it can be asked, how do you handle the resource constraint in a project? For this, first of all, we need to identify what's the impact of that resource constraint, whether it is a material resource, or that of the labor resource, or that of any machinery resource. We need to figure out that, and what's the impact of that resource on the activities. Then we can run through those activities where the resource is impacting. We will then figure out any supplementary resource that can be used in place of it, or if the resource have been only overloaded, whether we can use the shifts of the work sequences to label the resource, or in worst case scenario, we can resequence the non-critical items and place the resource or the prioritize the critical items. Last case would be we need to bring the additional resources to protect the critical path if we are unable to balance by shifting of the resource from the non-critical path to that of the critical one. Then after, we can rerun the critical path to ensure the updated plan is realistic and achievable. And if there is any impact on the critical path due to the resource constraint, what I mean by impact is if the project completion date have been moved forward, or that of the float have been consumed, on that case we need to raise the change control form and take the mitigation approach of that resource and minimize its impact. The next video in this series will be on value management. For more insight, please subscribe the Planners Way. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.